How's it going, man? We were just talking for a minute off the record, so we kind of already did the intros, but welcome to the podcast. Super happy to have you on. And
Thank you,
excited to
man.
chat.
I'm
Yeah.
honored to be on. Seriously, it's
Yeah.
a great initiative.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So you're guest number 2 for me, so I'm kind of figuring this out as we go, but I've you're guest number 2 for a reason. I'm excited to kind of pick your brain and also kind of catch up. We stay in touch, but you're always doing too many things for me to keep track of, so it'll be cool for me to piece it all together here.
As well, you as well have also sort of been a world traveler, so it's hard to keep up with both of us.
I know it's well, here we go. We can hash it all out here. So you're in Cape Cod right now, and you're staying there for a little while before heading out to Stanford. Is that correct, or what's your current situation?
Exactly. I got here a few days ago. I was in Lebanon finishing up my master's, and it just coincided. This is a family home, and we have these next 2 weeks reserved for us, for my immediate family. So it's like a refuge, and it's sort of a place to be rejuvenated. And I even came here during COVID at one point and found it just a really refreshing environment. So I'm here for a couple weeks, and then I'm off to Stanford, California, and I've never been out west, so that'll be a big step for me.
Wow, what's the furthest west you've gone?
Maybe like Tennessee.
Wow, man.
Not west at all.
Man, yeah, you'll love it. You'll love the West. It's you've got a West Coast vibe for sure, man. And would you? So I've been to your Cape Cod house many years, but we were just reminiscing when we were catching up a few minutes ago. But it's like it's a beach town, but it's a small town. It's not a city vibe. You can kind of get away from everything. Are you more? Is that more your vibe, or do you more like the city, or do you kind of like to get doses of both?
I like the balance of both. I mean, this place where I'm at, Old Silver Beach, it's called a village. It's a village association, and I think that's just hilarious. It's reminiscent of the villages of Lebanon, for example. And there's this writer who I really admire, and he's an elderly novelist, Lebanese novelist, and what he does is he spends his weekdays in Beirut and his weekends up north in the mountain. And I thought that was just such an ideal balance.
That's super cool.
So, I mean, it's an ideal balance because it's you need a lot of money to be able to do that, and you need to to be able to afford that. But it's something I'd like to work towards.
Yeah, for sure. I know Bill Gates too. He does like I forget what he calls it, like study week or something like that, reading week, where every year he takes a full week with no family, no phone, no distractions, and he goes out to a cabin, and all he does is he has books and notebooks. And he thinks. So he reads, writes, and thinks for so it's not like he's not doing it weekly. Like what was the Lebanese author's name?
His name's Rashid. Yeah.
Rashid. So he's not.
Yeah,
it's not like a recurrent. It's on an annual basis, but same kind of thing. But yeah,
is 1 week really enough though?
It's probably not, but. I've done a few solo trips in the woods. Like we did it the first one at the mountain school. I've done a couple since then. And just for people listening, AJ and I met at the mountain school, which is a semester-long boarding school for juniors in high school. And it was in Vermont. It was kind of a random. For me, it was random that I ended up there. And I ended up meeting all these cool people.
It was totally random for me too, unexpected, and one of the best and most serendipitous experiences, I think, in both our lives.
Yeah. It was one of those experiences that I consistently look back on and think like, wow, this has really helped me out so much, and kind of helped me figure out who I was and what I wanted. But yeah, we did the solo trip at the mountain school, and that was kind of my intro into like, hey, it's good to get away. It's good to take a break, turn your brain off. But that was just like 2 days or 3 days or something.
3 days.
So I imagine a full week of just thinking would like Bill Gates does. I imagine that would get you pretty relaxed.
You're right. Yeah, it's definitely harder than it seems. I mean,
yeah. Cool, man. Well, so tell me a little bit about what's next for you. You've been studying in the Middle East, and you're headed to Stanford. What are you going to study at Stanford?
I'm going to be joining the comparative literature department, studying Arabic literature, both classical or pre-modern. I like to say pre-modern, not classical. It's like an
Okay.
academic distinction. But so pre-modern and also modern, and hopefully, I mean, French is one of my main languages as well, so that's where the comparative aspect comes in. But it's really, I'll be working with the one Arabist in the department, and there's another, he has a couple other students, and I'm really excited because it's very interdisciplinary, but there's also an opportunity to work with all sorts of disciplines. But then there's also this one great mentor, Alexander Key, who's a young and open-minded, like I said, Arabist who's focused really on pre-modern Arabic literature. So I'm really going to study under. As you know, with the PhD, it's really, sometimes it's not so much about the program, but about the mentor,
Right.
the teacher who takes you under his tutelage and that old like Socratic tradition. So
Yeah.
that's who I'm going to study under. And
Gotcha.
very unexpected as well, because when I started a master's degree in Arabic literature 2 years ago, I would have never envisioned myself going into academia. I mean, there was always whisperings in the back of my mind, but for as long as people can really remember who think about me in college years, journalism has been like my shadow. And I've been really passionate about journalism. I founded or co-founded my high school newspaper, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a long journey. A lot of it has been unplanned, like most journeys are, and that's what I'll be doing now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So there's a little bit to unpack in there. And honestly, one thing that was always cool for me is like, you were one of the first people I knew that like knew what they wanted to do. I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but like I remember like at the mountain school, you're like, I want to be a journalist.
Really?
Yeah, and I had no idea. You know, I mean, I didn't even know what I wanted to do next week. You know, and so it always just and I thought it was really cool. You know, it was like a I don't know. It was just like there was a couple parts about it. One is that like I mean, I think in high school I was kind of hung up with like I was always playing sports, and so I was always kind of like the jock, and I tried to like fit into that a little bit, you know. And so then there was you, and then you're kind of also the same, like you knew sports and you got that kind of stuff, but then you had like this sensitive writing side that you were like open about and you were pursuing, and I always thought that was kind of cool. And just for me, like being a friend of yours, that kind of inspired me at the time to like start thinking about like what do I actually want to do. So that was kind of cool. And I guess so since I've known you, which is junior year when we were 16 or whatever,
Yeah.
junior of high school. So when did the journalism kind of seed start to grow for you? It must have been before that.
It's really interesting. I'm fascinated how memory works. It's something I want to look more into, even as I was thinking about my values, which is a theme of the podcast. And I started thinking about memories, and it's really weird how even from the mountain school, some things are so vivid and some names are so vivid, and then some people or names or places that I knew so well seem like I'll need a little bit more digging to recall, or I needed more digging to recall. And so when it comes to journalism, I don't remember when the origins are, right? Like I remember thinking it was way later than it really was, because I surprised myself going through just notes from elementary school, and I think I saw a note in 5th grade that was my first articulation in written form of me wanting to become a writer.
Wow.
Which is, I guess, expected for a lot of writers, have sort of this early inclination towards writing. And then journalism was just, I'm not really sure what it was about the Middle East, because there was really Middle East journalism that I got into. Like when we were in high school and after the mountain school, the Middle East was very sensationalized, as it still is, and ISIS was on the rise and had taken over Mosul in 2015, and there's a lot of the region was really painted as violence, and I thought I want to go there and explore, and it sounds really there's definitely an adventurous side to it. So I think it started to crystallize more in high school, and
Gotcha.
and led me into college to writing for the school newspaper freshman year, just all the boring articles that no one wanted to write. that they needed to cover. So like a speaker was coming to campus, and I would write like, a small review and such, and that's how it kind of got started.
Cool. Yeah, man. I'm kind of I consider myself a writer too. But
you definitely are.
Yeah,
From what you shared with me.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. But I'm kind of the opposite. I probably wrote for the first time like senior year of high school, freshman year of college, kind of thing. Like I write lyrics mostly, but other stuff as well. But that was like the first time I was like, I'm writing for fun, and I remember doing it, and I wrote like 4 lyrics, like 4 lines, and that was it for like a year. But just going through a few life changes, I kept kind of coming back to writing, when I didn't know what else to do, and now it's something that I do. So it's kind of interesting that for you, 5th grade, you're articulating it. And I don't know, it's kind of cool. Another side note too, it's kind of related to what you're saying, but off the topic of what we're talking about. But my next guest, his name is Leland, and his thing is memory. So we'll be talking on Friday.
Way.
Yeah.
Great, man. I'm looking forward to tuning in.
Yeah. He does competitive memory competitions. So
we'll be
talking all about memory.
I would fail that. I would definitely fail.
It's cool. We'll talk about but there's a whole system for it. But yeah, man. Okay. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if memory serves, your dad has Lebanese roots. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Do you think that played into kind of your interest in the Middle East, or was that just sort of a separate coincidence?
In the ever so slightest way, like maybe, the dust in the closet somehow, like I felt that there was, a bit of Lebanese-ness in us, but it was never so pronounced because my dad grew up in a really, if it's okay to say, WASP environment, quite privileged, there's this quite unique perhaps experience where his family had come over. Both of his parents were already born in the U.S., so he's 3rd generation, and his parents really had this sense of, we want to be American, we want to assimilate. His father was training to go to World War II and didn't end up going because he luckily broke his leg right before he was supposed to be shipped to Europe. That's another story. But, big Friendlies fans and baseball and was very patriotic in this sense. And but then there was also, in hindsight, a lot of small traces of this connection to our roots. So we sort of did forget some parts. But there was also some things that remained, mainly, and this is very common in the immigrant experience, is cooking. Food is always that one relic that remains and gets passed down. Anyone who comes from, most Americans have a tradition of what their great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents used to cook from the home country. And so that was something that got passed down. I didn't really recognize, I knew it was Lebanese, but I didn't really understand that, its connection to identity and what that meant, tabbouleh, or I didn't even know how to pronounce it, or, there's even some things that we used to say that I realized that were sort of like neologisms, words that we made up as our family, which is funny how language, how people make up language along the way. Everyone sort of, and I've heard of other Lebanese families doing that, but I was saying we were unique because a lot of Lebanese or immigrant families usually tend to really stick together. And the first generation did do that, but then my grandfather and grandmother sort of branched away from that and were really more focused about the success of their immediate family. And it paid off because my dad and his sisters are all really successful. And my dad's eldest sister is actually a professor of comparative literature at Harvard, and one of her topics is Arabic literature, or her specialties, and we never really talked too much about it. So it's also like an interesting coincidence how I ended up following this field. And also, I'm not quite sure if she knows, if I've asked her, like, do you think you ended up pursuing Arabic literature because you considered yourself Arab or Lebanese, or this was a thing? And she said, I think that was definitely part of it, but sometimes you end up doing things and you don't really know how you ended up that way. And
Hmm.
we share that sort of. I'm sure it had a small influence, but it wasn't like a pronounced influence.
Yeah, I'm sure like as you're going through, there's like notes of familiarity that resonate when you're traveling in Lebanon and learning Arabic and stuff like that. That even if it wasn't like a pre-thought out plan, it's probably
Yeah,
those little
we
nuggets.
like my whole family just got on a boat and left Lebanon. Like the
Wow.
situation today is comparable to how it was back then, unfortunately. It's famine and blockade and locusts were spreading. I mean, it was different, right? It was sort of
Hmm.
pre-modernization still, but there's still extraordinary suffering. And it was the first wave of immigration, and there have been three historic waves of immigration. And today is the third one. These past few
Gotcha.
years, we've seen a rise in the third wave with over 200,000 Lebanese immigrating in the past 2 years. And
Hmm.
when my family left at the turn of the 19th, early 20th century and such, there was also that sort of plight. So when I went back to Lebanon, literally everyone was gone. Everyone's been in the U.S. and everyone's been assimilated, and no one really speaks Arabic anymore.
Wow.
So I went on this journey to try and find a long distant relative, and I did end up finding one. Like
Nice.
somehow a cousin of my grandfather who claims that he's a cousin, but we don't really know how, and just a really interesting story.
Yeah. So just let's kind of tangent into that real quick. How did you track them down, and what was it like to meet them?
Um, so essentially, I think I've been to Lebanon at this point twice, but only on short vacations. It was always a dream to go and study there, but Lebanon, perhaps rightfully so, has a reputation of being less stable, and people don't really go there to study Arabic because it has such a French and English influence. So I was always in Jordan and on short visits. And then on my third short visit, while I was in Egypt, I went to Lebanon just for like a couple weeks. I was in a place called Tripoli, which is this big city in the north, and I was talking to this priest slash bookstore owner in this huge bookstore with like a bunch of dusty books. And I'm like, I really would love to connect with my family, but I don't know anyone from, they say like the house of Naddaff, for example. Like
Hmm.
it's like a way of saying the last name, like Bates means house, but also means last name in Arabic. So it shows the connotation of like the power of home and such with
Hmm.
last name. So I asked, do you know anyone from Beit Naddaff? And he said, yes, of course I know people from that home. You should go to Zahli. There's a small librairie, which is like a stationery store. And there's an old guy who works there. He might be related to you. So then I set out to that small bookstore, and I got on this small van, and I ended up walking along the river in what's called Zahli, which is the land of wine and poetry, actually, in Lebanon. And I ended up meeting him. I went there and I said, hi, in my sort of broken Arabic, is there anyone here who's from the house of Nadaf? Because it's called Nadaf Librairie. And they're like, I said, is there any older person? They said, yes, the old guy. He's like 81 years old. Do you want me to call him? I said, yes, please. Then I got on a phone with him, and he asked me all these questions about my family. He's like, what's your name? Alfred. Well, Alfred Jeffrey. I'm Alfred Jeffrey. What's your dad's name? Alfred. What's your grandfather's name? Alfred. He's like, that's crazy. All of you guys are Alfreds. What is going on? What's your great grandfather's name? I told him it's Nasib. He said, Nasib, no way. I used to know of Nasib or whatever. I'm coming over right now. Give me 20 minutes. And then he came over in his beat up Toyota and took me out for the afternoon. And I had like
That's
the best
awesome.
meal of my life with him. We got so full. I passed out in a food coma after smoking shisha with him. This like 81-year-old guy with a little French beret. And then he took me to his farm. This little property that he has was like kind of like a shack. And I fell asleep in his car, and he fell asleep in the shack. And then we woke up and like reminisced some more. And then he gave me some homemade arak, which is like it's like this Lebanese liquor equivalent to like the French anise or like licorice, sort of. That's very well known there.
Hmm.
He gave me a bottle because he makes it with his hands, and we've stayed in touch since, which has been nice.
That's awesome.
That was the story. I'm sorry if that was a bit prolonged, but I love telling that story.
That's a great story. I love that. It's like if I were to try to track down my long lost cousins here in the United States, I'd just go on Facebook and maybe send some emails. And I love how it's a lot of times when you're traveling, it's was it a bookstore owner first, and then
Exactly.
you're on a bus to the land of wine, and it's I love how stuff like that goes. All right, so you've been bouncing around the Middle East pretty much throughout your undergrad and master's, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, about 6 years.
6 years. Can you just kind of like give me the timeline of that? Like, where were you for how long in each place? Since you're kind of referencing these places you were, and I'm just trying to piece it all together.
Yeah, of course. So when I started my undergrad at Davidson, I actually met with the professor of Arab Studies named Rebecca Juven, who is one of the best Arabic professors in the country, I would say, indisputably. I'm biased, but of course, she became a mentor and really a role model figure, and she's like built Davidson's Arab Studies program. So, but I told my mom I'm going to only study it for 1 semester. Because my mom was afraid, what are you going to do with Arabic? The associations of I don't want my only son going to the Middle East where there's so many wars, etc. And I was also in ROTC at the time, which also gave my mom like another heart attack. Part of the adventurism, I just thought, okay, why not? Like I still wasn't totally. I didn't have my like political awakening yet, which came really soon, and where I started becoming more critical of like American jingoism and etc. But anyway, so that I studied Arabic the first year and then went to Jordan because there was a study abroad in Jordan in the summer of 2016. Gotcha. And then I came back to Davidson sophomore year, and then junior year, all my friends went to Lebanon because it has this reputation of being like the fun place. They have a crazy nightlife in Beirut, and I went to Jordan, which had this sort of pejorative nickname as the Hashemite Kingdom of Boredom. So I went back to Jordan. Everyone was like, why are you going back to Jordan and come to Lebanon? I said, no, I really want to get good at Arabic. This is the place to do it because people there don't speak English as well typically. I mean, if you want to generalize. And also it's not boring, side note. But that's another story. And then, so I spent my whole junior year there, and that was really an incredible experience. And then came back senior year and had a bit of a hard time adjusting after that. Graduated, and
real quick, let me stop you there. What was hard about adjusting back to the United States after being in Lebanon for a while?
So my sister usually says when I travel, I embody the immersive experience. So, like, I'll come back with a haircut from that place. I think this resonates with you, man. You much more than me. Like, where did you come back with dreads from again?
Brazil. That was Brazil.
So, man. Anyway, I really just fell in love with Jordanian culture, and I woke up every day with such purpose, and my goal was kind of to say yes to everything, like be the yes man.
Nice.
And so I ended up just drinking so much tea with so many people, and I had so much fun without social life was not centered, this is how I put it, was not centered around alcohol and drugs as it is in the US college scene usually. And so to have a different experience with a different culture and to have people so open to me, I don't know. I don't think it's because I was Lebanese or I have Lebanese origins. That helped a bit, but people always still joke that I was a spy. That happens to every foreigner who studies Arabic. Yeah. There's always this suspicion, but people were just open because I tried to be nice and respectful, and in turn, people were really nice and it's already hospitable. So then to go from that year where I made like people really genuine friends, like almost level of mountain school, if you will, to then leave and come back to Davidson where it's so fast paced and everyone's trying to get into consulting and everyone's, partying, and it's really the work hard, play hard mentality. And I was living above all the fraternities. It was not easy. Just a total, like a reverse cultural shock, even though I'm from the US. And yeah.
All right. So, shifting gears a little bit, you learned Arabic over your time in undergrad and masters, and I know you know French as well. That's the first language you learned, is that correct?
You could say it's was my mother tongue because my mom taught it to me when I was young, and yeah, my mom's from Belgium, so
Hmm.
it's her mother tongue for sure. It's her native language, and I sort of learned English and French simultaneously. But my dad was always really encouraging, even though he doesn't really speak French that well. He was always receptive to my mom only speaking to me in French, which could create problems for other families. You know, like I don't understand this language. I don't want my kids speaking a language that I can't really converse well in. And for him, it was the opposite. Like, I want my kids to be better than me, to know more language, to be
Yeah,
more language, to be more culture than me. So my mom and
super
dad, when
cool.
they married, they kind of made this deal that my mom would go back to Belgium every year. And my dad has kept that
Wow.
promise, and my mom has kept that as well. So
Wow.
we're really attached to Belgium. And I was 6 weeks old when I went to Belgium to get baptized for the first time.
Wow.
And I've gone back ever since. And
You
now,
go every year?
Yeah, just about. But French is not as strong as English. I really feel like English is the language I master, even though perhaps I struggle sometimes with idioms or with prepositions and writing. Sometimes I wonder, is that an effect of French, of knowing a couple languages? Because
Hmm.
sometimes I confuse them a bit. But I think yeah, I'm not sure why that is yet. I would like to say it is that and not a reflection of just not being able to properly articulate.
But yeah, I mean, I know Spanish not as well as French or Arabic, but I can get around in Spanish and a little bit of Portuguese as well. And I've kind of experienced the same thing. Like when I've been traveling for a while and I've been using a different language, like the English, it gets more kind of muddied. You know, it's like the flow of thought is a little, and it's almost like I'm thinking on a sublingual level. So this is kind of what I want to kind of like dig into for you. You know, you've grew up speaking multiple languages. For me, it was a little different. I grew up speaking English, and then in my teens, I learned some Spanish, and 20s kind of started tacking on a little bit more. But um, like when you're thinking, is it usually like in a language, or is it kind of sublingual, which you can then like translate out into Arabic or English? I don't know. It's always hard to like actually articulate how these processes work, but um, I don't know what is that
Yeah,
experience like?
I love the categorization of sublingual because I think there are certain categories where, for some reason, I've developed the habit of cursing in Arabic. I don't know why that happens, but I think it's just more evocative and powerful. It's really
Hmm.
cursing in Arabic is really. I mean, English cursing is sexual too. I think a lot of languages cursing is somehow sexual, but in Arabic, it's really direct. But and then French perhaps is the language of endearment. I used to do this thing, this like linguistic sort of trick that I played with my mom, where if I wanted something, if I asked in English, she would say no. If I asked again in English, she would say no. Mom, can I sleep over Sam's? Mom, can I sleep over Sam's? No, no, no. Maman, je peux dormir chez Sam? And then she would say, oh, okay, chérie. Like, yes, my sweetheart. Like, fine. Like, if I speak to her in French, for example, it somehow was more endearing because it touched her maybe in a more, I don't know, personal way. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, there's some people that also, I find the language you start off speaking with someone is the language you will carry out with them. And it's really hard to break that
Interesting.
habit sometimes. So, for example, I can never speak to my grandparents in English, even though, well, they're not that great in English anyway. My step grandfather is good, really, really good, very literary in English, but just speaking to him in English would be really bizarre. And
Hmm.
yeah, but I think also I carry various personalities in various languages. That's
Yeah,
something
that
I've
was
heard.
going to be my
I think
question.
Charlemagne, right, the ruler, medieval ruler, would say, I think you are as many languages You are as many men as many languages that you speak, whatever that means.
Interesting. That's
Personalities, cool. Perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I've felt that myself too a little bit, and I've heard other people kind of say that. I've also heard and kind of experienced too, like a voice change up. Like it's like not only does my personality, like what I say, but it's like the way I say it, like the actual like quality of my voice. Like it's
definitely,
I think it's like it's a little higher pitch when I speak in Spanish. I don't know how it works that way, but it's kind of funny. Have you had many relationships where you like whoever you're talking with, you guys like switch between languages, jump from French to Arabic, and kind of piece together a conversation?
Yeah. So my partner Rebecca, she's Lebanese, but also American, and she also grew up. So she was born in the U.S. in Maryland actually, and then moved back to Lebanon because her parents wanted to raise the kids in Lebanon. And she's from the mountains in the north. Actually, it's in the mountains, but near the sea. I think it's one of the most unique geographic locations. Nice. And around there, it's like a beacon of Maronitism, which is one of the main religions in Lebanon that's tied to the Catholic Church. And historically, this has changed. It's more complicated, but a lot of Maronites have a strong relation with France and with French language too. So a lot of them can get by in French or are Francophone or Anglophone. She's Anglophone, so she's really bilingual.
What is it?
I guess that means that her secondary education, her education in general, was conducted in English. And so it's bifurcated usually in Lebanon between French and English. So you'll find 40% of the country is French educated and 60% is English educated. Of those who are lucky enough to go to school, which is a large proportion. But anyways, she was English educated, but still had 10 years of French classes, which is her French when we started dating came back like this, and she has a really nice accent. So that's cool. I put it, since I'm sort of studying Arabic linguistics and I'm really into the literature and stuff, she helps me out so much and has helped me with the Lebanese dialect. And we often switch between languages, and then we started adding French as well. And she's been with me to Belgium, and my grandmother is really strict about speaking French with her because all the other, I suppose, in-laws kind of failed. Like my dad and my uncle's wife, just not good at French really, but they see a little hope in Rebecca.
Nice.
So long story short, cool. We find ourselves, it's also a very Lebanese thing. It's so jarring. You go there and you'll hear someone. So the cliche Lebanese expression, and it's a cliche because it's true, is "Hi, kifak, ça va?" which means it's French, English, and Arabic all in one expression, and it's what they say all the time. It's like, "Hi, how are you? How are you?" Sort of.
That's pretty cool. Can you just for my understanding, can you break it down like word by word and just like what? Yeah, how does that work?
So, hi is the obvious, right? Hello, and then the kifak is for a guy. Kifak, kif-ik is for a girl. I'm not sure what that's called linguistically, but it's a gendered language like French or a lot of the Romance languages. So you'd either say hi kifak or hi kif-ik, and then ça va. It's like in French, comment ça va? When if you want to say in French, like, how you doing? Like, ça va? So they'll say that whole phrase upon meeting someone, a friend, for example. It's quite informal.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. I have limited experience since most of the places I've traveled are just speak one language, but when in certain places I've kind of been a part of those conversations where it's switching, especially like in the Caribbean side of Costa Rica. There's like a lot of Jamaican influence. So there's like the patois, which kind of brings in a little bit of French, a little bit of Spanish, and some African languages, and then there's that infused with Spanish, infused with English, and I don't know. It's just I always think it's
impressive.
Cool.
It's really impressive when you realize the extent to which the world outside of the U.S. sort of manages multiple languages.
I know.
Navigates them just seamlessly. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah. Um, one more question is, and this is me kind of just out of my curiosity, but so all the languages that I've studied, Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese, and I'm currently on Unit 2 of French Duolingo, so coming
Let's
forward on that
go.
one. But um, they're all Romance languages, and Arabic is not. So I guess, and for you, you grew up speaking English and French, so you didn't like have to like learn. You didn't have to like sit down and like figure out a second Romance language, but you did for Arabic. But just what's your experience learning Arabic as a non-romantic language, coming from a romantic language background?
It's definitely challenging. It's a Semitic language, so it's like Hebrew as well, and Aramaic, which isn't really spoken. If I'm if that's I'm pretty sure isn't really spoken, obviously. So it's a small language family. There are a couple other languages, and well, one, there's the speaking that's different because there are a couple of sounds that are just we don't find in Romance
Mm-hmm.
languages. But then there's also the script, which is difficult and totally different as well. But there's this sort of a lot of assumptions that learning like Arabic or non-European languages in general must be so much more challenging. Perhaps it is more definitely with Chinese, or when people
Mm-hmm.
make these categories of the hardest languages in the world, and often Arabic is up there. I sort of want to dispute that and say Arabic or language learning really isn't hard. It's just about discipline, or that a child, for example, learns a language way faster than an adult. I wonder what the science is behind that, because I've read both mixed reviews, and I don't know if there is a clear verdict on that. It'd be interesting to talk to a linguist, but I think it's really just about my personal belief is it's about the amount of hours you put into the language and the
Mm-hmm.
practice that you put into it. And yeah, I guess one of the reasons that helped me fall in love with Arabic was, well, we did start off with the grammar and with tough words and with a lot of drills. We also started off with songs and movies and fun cultural events that were integrated in the classroom by this professor I mentioned, Rebecca Jubin. And so, really early on, I started to realize how romantic Arabic is. Like, there's this Lebanese singer named Fairuz who's just very well known for singing about an older epic of Lebanon, where in the mountains and the beauty and your boyfriend and girlfriend Habibi, and oh, you melt my heart, and all these really romantic lyrics. So that really helped me and also living in the country where they speak the language, I think is like the most important thing. I'm not an autodidact. I cannot learn on my own. I need to be like immersed with teachers teaching me. I don't think I'm
Mm-hmm.
talented at languages. I think the only reason I made it this far in Arabic, farther than a lot of people I studied with, is just because of perseverance. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you had put the same amount of hours as I did in Arabic, you would probably be more fluent than I am. It's been really
I,
challenging.
I'm honestly kind of the same. My journey with Spanish was I studied for 4 years in school, or 3 years for my middle school, and I was the worst. Like I did pretty well with my grades, but Spanish was my worst class. I didn't like it. I didn't get it. And then my mom, she kind of pulled the hero move and connected with someone in Guatemala, and I did like a 2 week abroad program, same kind of thing. And I was
I
just like,
remember that.
yeah,
Was
yeah.
that before or after the mountain school?
That was before I did it. The first time was before my freshman year of high school, and then I went. Since it went well, I basically went from like in 2 weeks. I went from the worst in my class to like maybe not the best, but like I could probably speak the best. And then like I was always bad at like the accents, like like the technical grammar stuff. But
Right.
in terms of speaking, like I could get around, and so that was after 2 weeks, and then I went back the next 2 years for like 3 weeks or a month each, and then that was when I like could actually do Spanish. Um, and part of so I was kind of learning Spanish. It started in middle school, but really was those 3 trips to Guatemala, which were before freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So right before the mountain school, I was probably coming off of a Guatemala trip. But in that like over the course of that time, like there was a lot going on for me. I mean, I was in high school. I was kind of learning about life for myself. Um, and then there was the travel aspect, being in Guatemala, which is a very different way of life than the United States, and sort of experiencing that. And I didn't have my parents with me for those trips. So there was also kind of like that being out on my own for extended periods of time for the first time. So there was a lot, but I really think that learning Spanish is really what changed my mind the most in those years. Like those 3-4 years were really important developmentally for me. But I think that learning Spanish was probably the most important part. And it was like, it kind of forced me to see, and again, this is coming from my background of only speaking one language prior. So you might've been a little different since you already had 2 languages. But it just forced me to see that people think differently, like there's just like little, like sometimes in Spanish, you'll say the word like I have hunger instead of I am hungry, which is just a subtle difference, but like it changes the way you think about hunger, and it's just, and all these subtle differences, they add up and there's patterns of them. And it's just like kind of changes the way people live their life, starting with the language. And studying Spanish kind of forced me to see that and forced me to feel it, like I would go and speak Spanish for a month and I would think differently and sort of change the way I lived a little bit. But my question for you is, in learning Arabic, so it's a little different contextually for you since you already had a second language, but this is your first non-romantic language and the first time that you really like sat down and learned a language through your own effort rather than just being like taught through experience as a kid. But did you have a similar experience, like thinking differently, kind of seeing the world differently, like becoming a different person in some ways?
Yes. And also, but I liked what you're saying, how sort of language and studying languages makes you realize just the diversity of this world, and just how overwhelming and expansive the world is and diverse, really. But I think also it made me realize, like, also how many points we have in common. Perhaps this is just a critique of globalization and capitalism and, U.S. hegemony, etc., but something beyond that as well, which is just that, like, I had a lot in common, the same sort of ambitions and desires that I myself had, and that, or maybe my friends had, growing up, to get a car, a nice car, and get a house, and get married, and you find that in all over the world. And so having conversations, and I think the reason why people were more open to me is because I was putting in the effort. There's been a lot of critique on like the English spreading around the world, or the Disneyification of the world, as one author put it in in comparative literature. But at the same time, there's the negative side of that is that, like, everyone sort of expects that when you expect to speak to you in English, and therefore when you travel, people will apologize for not being able to properly speak English, versus you should have to apologize for not properly speaking the language that you're going to travel, where you're going to travel to. So when you go to Guatemala and try and make an effort to speak Spanish and stuff, I think it's appreciated, and therefore you can pick up on nuances. I think also, like, learning proverbs is really cool, because there's some universalism in them. Like, if you try and find the origins of proverbs, sometimes you'll find the origins, like the question of authenticity and stuff, it's impossible. They come from like the Bible or from like pre-biblical times, from ancient times, some of like the oldest sort of proverbial sayings on jealousy and love and ambition, etc., etc. But then sometimes you'll find some that speak to the nuances of the culture, like in Arabic, like if you say in Syria, especially, hamatik bthabbik, it's like your mother-in-law loves you. That's what that phrase means. And it's a proverb that you use when, let's say, you go to someone's house and they're eating and you come uninvited or invited, and there's food out, and they say, hamatik bthabbik, your mother-in-law loves you, which means come share this meal with us. You have to eat with us because your mother-in-law loves you. And it shows sort of the importance of food and And I think food is universally important, as I said before, but especially, Lebanese Syrian food is really important. The cuisine is really, really important. It's really, really rich as well. So I hope I answered your question, that studying the language made me realize the differences, but also the sort of the commonality. And also on a political note, and the last thing I'll say, because Arabic is ultimately, like everything, so politicized, that when the Arab Springs happened in 2011, the sort of failed uprisings, if you will, like a lot of people writing from New York were like, oh my God, Arabs want democracy. What is this? This is unreal. It was like an awakening, not so much for the Arab region, but for like the commentators in the West, who suddenly realized that the same human aspirations were also in the Arab world. And that is something that I've sort of been trying to fight for as well in my own advocacy, if you will, or in my own research and in sort of everything I do.
Yeah. Let's go into that a little bit. What do you want to accomplish with that? Like, what are your goals or ambitions on that front?
Oh God. I'm not.
It's a big question.
I mean, it's hard because like I'm going into this program at Stanford, and I'm really grateful to be accepted and to be going to it. It's called the Knight Hennessy program, and it's a fellowship, a global fellowship centered around purposeful leadership and having a civic mindset and independence of thought, really. And it's this like prestigious global program that for graduate study that supports graduate study. So they ask you these questions, and you have to believe them, and you believe in them, but sometimes articulating them just seems, when you look at the news, it seems like insurmountable with all the challenges we're facing. Like, what do you want to tackle? Do you want to tackle gun law in the U.S. because of how messed up this country is when it comes to gun law? Do you want to tackle climate change because in 50 years we might not have a planet? Like, do you want to tackle like the racism towards Arabs in general and post 9/11 and, you know, the culture of surveillance that happened in this country and the NSA? Like, what do you want to do? And so you start. The cool thing is I'll be around all these individuals with all these different ambitions. And I think where I fit in there is I hope to try and make a difference in writing and in speaking, to try and raise more awareness about the Middle East and the diversity of the Middle East, and not even starting from the whole Middle East, maybe just starting from Lebanon. If I could teach some people about Lebanon, because I find that Lebanese in general are way more open-minded than Americans. It's a generalization, but I think it's true. I'm in cafes in Lebanon. I hear people asking me about Democrats and Republicans, which party has the elephant as its emblem, etc. I'm like, that level of sophistication of a question from someone in Lebanon, like, the people in the U.S. usually even know where Lebanon is on a map, etc. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be still done in raising awareness. Edward Said is like one of the most formative thinkers who helped me sort of realize the power imbalance, and so many other people. He's produced like a school, if you will. He had a bunch of students. One of my professors studied under him. One of my other professors studied under his arch nemesis, Bernard Lewis. Very different views of how to study the Middle East and how to talk about the Middle East and Arabs. So for better or for worse, I was largely influenced by Edward Said, and I think there's parts that you can criticize about his theories and such, and perhaps some of the stuff he writes outside of Orientalism I find more useful for literature. But by and large, to sum up what I'm saying, that I think the world that we're still living in today is very much the world of Edward Said, even though he's been gone for over a decade now, unfortunately, and that there's still a lot of correction and raising awareness to do. Yeah,
it's and kind of asking that question is a little unfair because it's such a big question. But the reason I ask is I struggle with a lot of the same things you're saying. Like, I see all these systematic problems, these big problems that affect, everyone really. And it's almost like I want to help, I want to do something productive, but what's like
Exactly.
the most important thing? Kind of where I've come to is kind of to touch on another thing you've said is like having tea in Lebanon with people, being the yes man, and getting those conversations, and then like putting in the attention, putting in the effort, like in those conversations to have like meaningful moments with people and understanding new ideas. I really think that's where it has to start. It's like, at that granular level. And then, I mean,
Exactly.
I have no idea, broad strokes, what to do really with my life to make the change that I want to see in the world. But I really think like start there and, build it brick by brick up from there.
Jake, one thing I've been thinking about, which is just crazy, is maybe a dream that I'd like to talk to you about is the mountain school. I think the mountain school is the embodiment of an open-minded education that cultivates like humane instincts, makes you a better person, a more thoughtful person. Before the mountain school, I was a troublemaker. Even getting in there, I had a chip on my shoulders. I'd been expelled from middle school. I was into bad things. I was trying to figure out myself, and it was like detox in a way, but also it made me more true to myself. It gave me sort of values, so many values we could talk about later that I'm sure we share a lot of them as well. And I think if there's a way, and it has been done, or maybe it's really, really, really difficult to get done, but to sort of export the mountain school and other places around the world. This bridge between environmentalism and spending time in the nature and the Thoreauian, transcendental effect of nature and Emerson's self-reliance and all of that we learned, with also the like intellectual heavy work of, taking physics class or humanities, etc., and learning about the world and asking really hard questions at a young age. I think that is what makes like better citizens and makes people have more of a better sense of ethics and civic responsibility and appreciate diversity. Yeah. And so there's a way to sort of export that or bring that into other places. Like maybe Lebanon would benefit so greatly from that, but there's so many challenges, in most countries in the global south with corruption and all the other issues plaguing the global south.
Yeah, man. I've honestly had really similar thoughts. Like I look back at the mountain school, and I don't want to tangent. I mean, I could talk for a whole hour about kind of some of the goals I have related to that. But just the nutshell version is that kind of my long-term plan that I've kind of been just conceptualizing over the last few years is I would like to have these little tiny house communities at different places around the world, where it's like for artists and entrepreneurs, they would rent it like pretty much at cost. So I would rent it out for whatever it cost me to maintain. And I just want to basically copy the mountain school, but more for like people earlier in their career, artists and entrepreneurs who want to, cultivate whatever they're working on, whatever projects they're doing, and have like a little community of similar minded people. Same thing as the mountain school. And I think the word about the mountain school, you said that really hit home for me, was responsibility. Like that was the first time in my life, like I really understood like what it is to be responsible for myself as a human. It was like we had the farm, we had wood heated buildings with the fire. So it's every single day we would wake up, we would have like a chore period. We would go to school for like 7-8 hours or whatever, and then we would have like a 4-hour work period.
The work study. Work study.
Yeah. And I think especially in the United States, and especially with a lot of the mountain school crowd was like from New York City, where they weren't taking 4-hour breaks out of their afternoon to go farm for sure. There's no chance. And I don't know. I mean, for me, like really just like seeing the amount of time and the amount of effort, and even just like feeling how heavy it would be to go farm and then carry back like a bucket of corn, to the dining hall. It's just like really being confronted with like, this is what it takes to like stay warm. This is what it takes to stay fed. This is what it takes to keep the animals alive through the winter, Just seeing that, feeling that, seeing this is what it's like to see a chicken get killed so you can eat it for dinner. It's like,
It,
I,
it builds responsibility, but also gratitude as well, which is something
exactly.
that's often lacking.
Yeah, that's
Makes you
sort of
realize,
like
dude.
you kind of get the gratitude through like by fulfilling your responsibility. It's kind
Exactly.
of the back end. But yeah, man, I think that I'm on the same page with you. Where the mountain school it's kind of a bizarre experience for me. Like I thought I was going to hippie camp instead of school for a semester. I didn't realize it was going to be like I remember I got there and one of our friends, Lucas, he was like, the first day, the first conversations I had with him, he's like, dude, did you know that this is ranked number 9th in the Forbes hardest schools in the country list? I was like, dude, what? Like, I thought I was gonna. I thought there was an orchard, dude. Yeah. So like going in, I did not know that. I don't know how I got into that school. I think they don't have a lot of male applicants, so if you're seeing this in your mail,
That worked
definitely
in our
apply.
favor.
Yeah, for sure.
We've definitely shared that sort of same sentiment of, did they really pick us to be here?
Yeah.
This sort of doubt that we had, but it was definitely a period where we were surrounded by, I would say, 45 of the smartest people I've ever been surrounded by. Everyone was intelligent in their own ways, just brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it was the first time, and I think your idea of these small huts or whatever you want to call them, houses for artists and entrepreneurs at an early stage, like a stage where we were at, is really early, but it's a pivotal to do it to support emerging artists, emerging creatives, emerging leaders, because it's at that stage where you have a lot of doubts, and when you're maybe not surrounded by, if you're not surrounded by the right people, then you can just go a totally different route in life. And so to be around so many people that just supported you in one way or another, that said, actually, it's cool to be nerdy. It's cool to learn, to want to learn. It's cool to be curious. I'm just as curious as you. I'm more curious. And it was like really, but not in this competitive way. Like, I'll help you with your physics homework, or let me read the essay you wrote. Let's stay up together. And that was just incredible. And I don't think I'll ever have it. And hopefully it's Stanford. We'll see. But
yeah,
I haven't had an environment like that since.
Yeah. For me, I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, it was I think important for me at the time to see it's cool to be interested in journalism. That was just one of those realizations for me, for sure. Yeah, man. So we've kind of covered a lot here. I want to get into maybe some of your takeaways. Your takeaways from your experiences, your travels, your studies. Again, I'm going to start big, and then I'll kind of just let you go with whatever direction, and we'll kind of whittle it down. But you're 18 when you start college, and that's 6 years ago, whatever. How are you different now after having spent what is it, maybe 4 cumulative years in the Middle East, something like that?
3.
Okay. So yeah, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time to be out of the country. What if you were having a conversation right now with an 18-year-old version of yourself who had maybe similar ambitions but different experiences? What do you think would strike you as what did your younger self not see that you see now?
First off, I would hope that I would be kind to my 18-year-old self, because I would recognize a lot of my younger self in me. And there's this writer I like called named George Saunders, who's I think he's one of the best writers in American fiction writers. And he says, I used to admire clever people, but as I've gotten older, I've started to admire kind people. And I think that is something that I share with him, is that I think I was growing up when I was maybe 18, part bully, part bullied. It sort of goes together. I think I was kind. I was always really kind, and kind to like the bullied and the downtrodden, etc. And I hope that those sentiments and that sort of inclination has strengthened only throughout this time, because I'm not the type of person that lives in like a parallel universe when I'm traveling. It's easy to go and experience Lebanon as an expat or in these countries. You see it all the time, and just live in a parallel universe, to make fun of the local culture, to push it aside, to have just sort of, to look down in a condescending way. And for me, I always tried to, as you said, when you went to Guatemala and to Brazil and all these other travel experiences, to start at the granular levels, having conversations with people. And I reported some really, really, really tough stories that I still have not really totally processed, that have surely changed me in different ways and that will influence my writing in known and unknown ways. Like a story in Tripoli, that city I mentioned, the bookstore city, but it's also the poorest city in Lebanon. They have a lot of people that are fleeing illegally by boat. And I interviewed this family whose son fled by boat and went missing. And he was still missing at sea, and a bunch of the people on the boat died, and his cousin made it back, but his cousin's son died in his hands. And hearing stories like that, of just that extreme level of poverty and desperation and injustice, marked me in a lot of ways. Like getting up close to sort of various stories like that. With the thing in Lebanon, being there these past 2 years, I mean, I could talk about Egypt and Lebanon. They're just so different. So I'm going to just talk about Lebanon. I was there while the country was going through one of the worst financial collapses in the past 150 years, according to the World Bank, where the currency lost 90% of its value. And I was trying to not just live it as a student and survive it as a student, but also by my nature of being empathetic, to try and understand what was going on. And it was, in a weird, twisted way, enriching to live through that, like the descent into hell, but also just really hard to see so many people suffering. And so I don't know
what is that? What are, like, can you share some visuals of like, what did it look like to, like, what kinds of things did you see when? I
mean, Lebanon, always you saw kids begging and kids in the searching in trash, but you saw like 3 times as much as you would have seen before. Like on daily walks, you see kids begging, kids in trash cans, not even begging because they assume you're not going to give, because no one's really giving money. You saw people who are middle, upper class, their life savings evaporate because of the Ponzi scheme, and so they couldn't get their money out of the bank when there was just the depreciation that happened overnight, and all the money was sent of like the elite was shipped out of the country, and all of the other people, the ordinary people, just suffered. So ordinarily people's conversations were about money, and money they lost, and trying, how are they going to survive, like day to day. Like I recently read this book by Jenny Odell. I think you would like it. It's called How to Do Nothing. I read parts of it. How to Do Nothing, like, what is it? Something against the attention economy. And it's just sort of, that book inspired me during COVID, because it's about going out and bird watching and doing nothing and taking your time with the artistic process, and against, this multimedia push. And when I talked to Rashid, the writer, about it, and I gave him part of this book, an excerpt to read, he said, it must be nice to have the privilege to write about these sort of things. Like in Lebanon, you don't, as a writer, as a creative, as someone trying to, you can't ignore the reality that is so ugly. I hope that I painted somewhat of a picture of just how bad things are there.
Yeah. It definitely paints it for me. And all right, so I guess kind of the flip side of that last question, I was asking you if you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self after having some experiences. What has changed? I guess in my experiences, like I've lived in, I would actually have to think about it, but like 6 or 7 states since I was 18 in the United States, and I've traveled to several countries. So I've been in a lot of places, and every time I'm in a new place, like, I might change my hairstyle or change my vernacular a little bit. There's always things that change, but I found there's certain things that never change. No matter where I go, there's certain parts that never change. So to flip that question to you a little bit, like what parts of you don't change? No matter, I mean, it's you go in, you learn a new language, you're eating new food, you're talking with new people. What parts of AJ stay the same?
Definitely. I love that. I'm sorry I sort of evaded that question because you start out so vague and it was easy to go into be a bit tangential, but I think the courage stays. I mean, courage comes from cœur, etymologically, the heart, and you often say put heart into something. You say that in Arabic as well. You can say the same phrase, which is really stepping outside your comfort zone. So I think whenever there's a moment where you have to be vigilant. I'm vigilant as well. I learned that the hard way a few times, but like whenever I could step out my comfort zone, whenever there was something that I probably didn't want to do, but I knew it was going to be good for me in some way, I would do it. So that's something I think trying to belief in oneself is really difficult, but my grandfather, when I was, I think 12 or 13, the night before he passed away, he shared with me a little bit of advice as if he knew and he wanted, these words of wisdom to stay with me. And
did he know that it was his last days? Like, was it?
I don't know.
Was he like on his deathbed?
No, not at all. He was old. He was really old and deteriorating and such, but it was not like we knew. It was just we went out to dinner in an Italian restaurant like we would every few weeks or whatever. And for some reason, he's not much of a talker, but he decided to be a talker that night and share with me some wisdom, some elderly wisdom. And one thing he said was about one of his friends who everyone made fun of him, saying that he wanted to be a doctor. Everyone said, "You're stupid. How are you going to be a doctor? If you want to be a medical doctor, you have to be really smart, et cetera, et cetera." But he just kept believing in himself, and then he ended up becoming a really successful doctor. And so I think that is something that I still really struggle with, that with feelings of inadequacy, and it's reassuring that other artists all sort of struggle with that, of not feeling like they're good enough. But there's a difference between not feeling like you're good enough, but also believing in yourself. And I've realized that, working consistently on something and believing in myself will one day hopefully lead to my goals. And so that's something that my work has persisted, and my writing has improved, and my publications have improved, and my Arabic has improved. And these things have all improved since I was 18, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I stayed consistent, and I sought out advice from older, more experienced people, and I maintain relations like the one that I have with you and with several other friends around the world, because my grandfather also told me, what is it? You are known by the company you keep. So perhaps I can tie this in here as well and say, like, what he means was the friend circle, because I had a bad group of friends of like who were up to a bunch of hooligans, and up to a bunch of, I was going to say shenanigans, but who were just into, doing a bunch of bad stuff. And sort of, it took me maybe till I was 18 to really shed that off. And in the mountain school, I picked up some friends, and in high school as well. But the friends that I'm still in touch with today are friends that I really want to be in touch with, and that I really respect, and that I learn a lot from. And so I think that's something that I would have told myself as well when I was 18, is just remember what your grandfather told to you the day before he died. Because that's wisdom that you can always pass down. Proverbial wisdom that transcends time.
Definitely. This is kind of out of order here, but I'm just sort of realizing we didn't really talk too much about your life before the mountain school. So just to kind of fill that gap in the conversation. So I visited you after the mountain school a couple times, I think, in Dedham, Massachusetts. What's it like in Dedham? Yeah. What's it like it's south of Boston, is that right? It's like a suburb south of Boston.
Correct. It's a suburb south of Boston that almost wishes it was in Boston, and that gets made fun of by the Bostonian towns for for wanting to be part of Boston, but not actually, for speaking the Boston accent, but still being suburban.
It definitely, at least from an
perhaps-
outsider, it definitely feels Boston. The vibe,
Really?
yeah, and it's just like it's got that like kind of that blue collar kind of grinding. I remember when I was visiting you one time, we were hanging out with some of your friends on the street, and then like some other car came and honked at us, and then we were yelling back and forth, and then like we thought we were gonna have to go fight these people. It was like stuff that I'd just grown up in the suburbs in Baltimore. I'd never experienced stuff like that. But
I thought I was beyond that phase post mountain school, but I do remember that it was still in me. It took me a while to shake off that, and it's part of adolescence too.
Yeah, yeah. So just touch on that a little bit. From my perspective, it seemed like it was a kind of rough around the edges vibe, I guess. But from your perspective, being in it, yeah. But we've talked about your life afterwards. But this part, growing up in Boston, how did that shape you?
I was really uncomfortable in my skin. Was struggling with multiple identities. I was friends with the public school kids, and then I was in the private school, and I was on full scholarship. I didn't want to say full scholarship, and we were well off, but not always so well off. And so I could, like you, and the ethos behind this podcast of holding people from all walks of life. I was quite literally walking with people from very different backgrounds, from the ones who were able to afford the $40,000 a year education to the ones whose, single broken home with a lot of problems and drugs. And I experienced both those worlds. And it's I really see the mountain school as like a transformative turning point moment where like I was something pre-mountain school and I was something post-mountain school. And one thing that was pre-mountain school that sort of was also another wake-up call was at one point I call this the pickle jar incident. I don't know if you know this story.
No.
But a bunch of guys at one point in the night who must have been pissed off at me for one of myriad reasons, came and threw a pickle jar through my front window like one Monday night and smashed the whole windows, and it reeked of the stench of putrid stench of pickles. And my dad took me aside. He said, "Son, I don't even want to hear it. You don't tell anyone about this. Give me your phone." And like, essentially you're grounded, but like, what does that even mean? Like, you need to have this way. If this isn't enough of a jarring, quite literally wake up call, then what is? Because you're around really angry, vengeful people, and and so I came to sort of appreciate how my parents helped steer me out of that. My mom as well, just growing up with a parent who's not from the U.S., even if it's someplace like Belgium, which is not quote unquote so exotic, but is different enough, was just also one of the reasons why I sort of struggled with my identity. And in the U.S., it's not cool to even speak another language in that environment that I grew up in, where it's sort of everyone has to sort of be the same. You lose your individuality, And so fighting to hold on to individuality, to say writing is cool, or reading is cool, or traveling is cool, which is so banal now because it's like, no shit, these things are cool. But back then, exactly. It wasn't at all like that. So, that's how my upbringing, or my adolescence, prepubescence to adolescence shaped me.
It's interesting. I think America has a reputation for being very individualistic, like especially in contrast to China or something like that, which is more collectivist. But I think what you're saying is something I've experienced too, where it's almost like under the guise of individualism, like everyone kind of ends up boxed into the same kinds of things. It's I don't know. It's since I felt just like you're describing, where I was supposed to be a certain kind of way. I was always struggling with my identity in high school. I was trying to like decide what I wanted to be rather than just being me,
I think individualism perhaps is more of speaks to the culture of and the work ethic of the U.S. Hyper capitalistic society of you're on your own to make it on your own, and this so-called meritocracy that was part of the American dream that doesn't exist anymore. That sort of came crashing down. And then the more the collectivism is the societal collectivism of what is in the norms to do. And even though there are a lot more liberties in the US, personal liberties, than a lot of countries, there's still, if you want to be an artist or if you want to be different from from doing something that's the 9 to 5 job, or to think really, really differently, there are repercussions, and it is difficult.
Yeah. And it's socially enforced.
Exactly.
It's not politically enforced. All right, so we've kind of been jumping around a little bit, but I guess just to kind of try to tie it all together, the point of this podcast is to kind of get at your values, and I think we've indirectly kind of pulled out a few different things, but I don't know, it's hard to answer directly, but what do you value, especially in the context of all your experiences? We've talked about it, but just to ask the question directly.
Sure. I love this question, and I think I referenced one of the most important values to me, which was the quote on kindness, being kind. People remember you for your kindness. They don't remember you for your publication, really, or the work that you did, or what your job was. They remember how you treated them, and not being condescending, because people are classist in so many different ways. They try and they carry an aura of superiority, and I really want to try and be more open-minded and egalitarian in my thinking, and kind to sort of everyone, and realize the potential in everyone. And that's why I think maybe later down the road I would love to be a teacher, to sort of give back what teachers have given to me, who believed in me when so many people didn't. The few who did believed in me more than I believed in myself, like my Arabic professor, Dr. Chubin. Courage, as I mentioned, right? The connection with the heart and stepping outside your comfort zone, and travel as a value is something we share. This, like you said, learning Spanish, learning language, stepping outside your comfort zone, and how a man or a person is as many languages or cultures as he knows and speaks. You can spend your whole life doing that and still not be satisfied. Let's see. I mean, drive and perseverance, I don't want to say it's overrated. I very much have a drive, and I'm very perseverant and such. So I would have to count that as one of my values. But lately, my partner, Rebecca, has been trying to teach me balance. She comes more from from the mountains of Lebanon, and has more of this ethos of taking one's time and processing things, and not, being so competitive with everything, which is sort of how I've been for a long time, perhaps dealing with my inadequacy. So there's drive, but then also I've come to realize the importance of balance as a value.
Gotcha. And what types of things help you establish that balance? Is that what we were talking about at the beginning, doing the weekends in Cape Cod? Bill Gates does his getaway week. Is it like that, or something different? Yeah,
I wish I could do the weekends in Cape Cod, but it's a little challenging as the family house and such. But I like yoga, for example. I've gone into yoga.
Interesting.
I think working out just in general. I like tennis a lot. I really want to get back into it. I tried going to the gym and lifting, and I just find it so boring, man. I don't know if you're still able to do that.
No, I do like MMA and jiu-jitsu training, but I do not like weights.
MMA. There's something that's also it works out the mind as well, and it's mutual in some way, and it's strategic, and it's fun. But just going there and lifting, it just seems so menial. But what else is a way that I balance?
Well, I guess just to ask it in a different way, I guess, what is it that you're balancing? What is it that is it Rebecca? Is that her name?
Yeah, yeah.
What is it that Rebecca's suggesting you balance?
Uh, you know what it is? It goes back to the mountain school too, and I'm just processing this, but it's being in the present. I don't know if that's balance or
Yeah.
what it is, but like enjoying the present, savoring the present, being here, not being like 5 years from now. It's easy to talk
Yeah.
about my goals in 5 years. Like you asked me that question,
Same.
I've laughed because I've been practiced to answer that question for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
or been trained rather. But or then like I'm also caught up in the past a lot, or I'm reminiscent about the past, but trying to be there in the moment, which requires a balance because being on the computer, being a journalist, like Twitter was so important to me, and so I'm always on my phone. And sort of, it's been really hard for me because I was working in Beirut with the Associated Press on a freelance contract that could have potentially yielded into a full-time job or something, but I turned that down to now go to Stanford and Palo Alto, which is its own. They call it the farm. It's its own bubble, its own community, and I'll have 5 years now to be able to think more slowly and read and process things more slowly, and hopefully above all, tying back to the balance, being in the present, which is something that I haven't really been so much in the present these past few years.
Yeah, I think that's to me, presence would sort of be like a symptom of balance. Where and the causes would be like exercise and whatever else you do, taking time away, meditation, reading, whatever. Everyone has their unique formula, their unique concoction of things that lead to that balance. But
that's a great way of wording it. I love that.
Mm-hmm. So I think about these things a lot too, and I'm always trying to find that balance, and it's always kind of like I can feel it when I'm not present. I can feel it when like I'm stuck worrying about the past or thinking about the future. So I can sense like, oh, things are out of balance, but it's hard to always like trace back what's the root cause, like what's the unbalanced ingredient in the formula here. So that's something I'm constantly grappling with. It's every week is a new mindset, and it's you need to make little adjustments. At least that's how I think of it. And so I'm kind of asking you these questions to dig in.
When you're really, really, really ambitious, it can be hard to balance because sometimes the things that are most essential to maintain the ambition you just want to neglect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, but trying to purposefully find time in your day to turn your phone off, or to reflect, or to write something down, or to maintain a practice in sort of a mindset of intention, whether it's spiritual, whether it's exercise, etc. Figuring out those causes that you can do that can sort of lead to the balance
right.
is really essential.
Yeah, I totally agree. What is the status of your phone right now?
Are you laughing because of when we were setting up this podcast, you were like, I was telling you essentially that I want to throw my phone in the toilet for 2 weeks and sort of do the Bill Gates challenge without knowing that it was the Bill Gates challenge. Yeah. I've been feeling miserably. Like I had a bunch of articles and projects that I still wanted to do. And so I have spent more time outside here, and I've only been here a few days, so I'm hoping next week that I can actually turn it off. But my phone is still like at 75% battery, and the Wi-Fi is still in there, and I spent this morning on email and shit, so I'm failing.
Well, I don't know if it's a total failure. I had a phase about a month back where I tried to block out my every day, like for a week, out on Sundays for a couple of weeks. I blocked out like 8 hours or 16 hours a day of like, this is what I'm going to do. I said, like, this will be a 1 hour rest period. And then I'm going to, go on a run. And then I'm going to go do some jujitsu. And then I'm going to go write this thing. And I failed miserably, or at least that's how it felt. But then I would have 12 different things on my calendar every single day, 12 different little blocks of things I was supposed to do. And I would probably only get like 8 done. There's constantly, I was missing things, or, I was supposed to be going and working out in the garage, and I would just feel like going on my phone instead. But then after those couple of weeks, and after feeling like every single day, I was like, oh, I missed 5 blocks today. Oh, there were 6 things I was supposed to do that I didn't do, or whatever, Every day was pretty bad. But then I reflected afterwards, and I was like, you know what? Got way more done the last few weeks trying to get everything done than I did prior to that when I wasn't even trying anything,
That's 8 out of 12 is so impressive. I'm at like a 3 or 4 or 5 out of 12. I mean, it depends, but yeah, I started using this planner. Actually, my friend who's in law school at Duke, who I really look up to, who's really, really organized. That's something that I value, is trying to maintain order as well. But
yeah, that's actually that was going to be my question. Is what's your system for organization? And
yeah, exactly. It's the passion planner. I mean, it sounds cheesy as hell, but I just bought my 2022-23 academic year passion planner for $40 last night.
I'm gonna write that down.
Best investment. It like organizes your week by blocks. So I don't know. It's like a functioning. You could use the calendar on your phone, but I like the detachment from my phone, having to write it out. And I color code. Mm-hmm. Pink is fun. Pink is like me time. It's like working out or writing for fun or like going to the movie, which I rarely ever do. And then like orange is like, so I was just trying to think, because I think Freud has this 3 categories of organizing life, which is like work, love, and play. So I guess pink is the love. The play, I guess, which isn't really play, which the orange, which is more like things that I enjoy doing, that sort of like for edification or stuff, not the essentials, but I don't know, I can't think of a concrete example right now. But then the yellow, the basic yellow highlight is like the work. Like you have to do this, you have to write this essay, you have to send these emails, you have to read, and you have to be this disciplined to be a grad student in literature, because a lot of people will just laugh and be like, oh, what, your job is to read? And it's like, yeah, literally my job is to read books. Like I have to, that's like my 9 to 5. And if I'm not keeping up and doing that, then not, keeping up with the field like I should be, and I'm falling back. So it's a huge privilege, but I try and treat this work like real work, as if I'm an accountant, although with a different tool set.
Right.
So yeah, the passion planner is definitely my go-to. It ended like a couple weeks ago, and I feel a bit lost as a result, but maybe lost in a good way, because it's so methodical.
Yeah, it's good to detach. What is, and I know you're kind of you're in Lebanon now, you're temporarily in the Cape before you go off to Stanford, but you've got this passion planner which you kind of block it out, but what are your typical days like? And you're kind of in flux right now, but so I guess what do you expect your days to be like, kind of in this life that you've chosen?
Rashid, the writer, Zaif, he's one of the most translated Lebanese novelists as well, and was just like a huge mentor and friend and father figure. Was really strict about getting my Arabic better, and I spent more time with him than anyone else this past year and a half in Lebanon, and I admire him in so many ways, like his work discipline and his routine. He treats it like a religion, and I really appreciate that, because he wakes up, I don't know, 6:30, 6, 7, and then he works. He has his breakfast, and by 8 he's working at the desk writing, or working, whatever that translates as, and then he does that till about 11, and then he goes and he gets coffee and socializes with friends, because talking and socializing is really important for work as well. And he does that until 1 or so, maybe 11:30 to 1, and then 1 to 1:30 lunch till 2:30, then a 20-minute power nap. I've integrated the cat nap siesta, Spanish siesta. I do that. I really want to do that every day, 20 minutes. Like turn my phone off. You feel incredible when you wake up after that if you do it right. So I've been doing that, and then work from like 3 to 7. And then you go on a walk at 7, around an hour walk, or you do something for an hour, and then have dinner at 8, on the European dinner time, or the Lebanese dinner time, whatever, not the American 5:30, let's have our mac and cheese. And then you go to bed, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and you repeat that schedule. And yeah, it's a privilege to have that schedule and it will be different as a student, but I'm a morning person. I love the mornings. I love waking up before everyone and sort of waking up as the world wakes up with the light. Yeah. And so I like waking up between 5 and 6:30. That's an aspiration for the next 5 years. Getting my best work, the hardest intellectual work done early in the morning. I also want to make sure I'm playing tennis and working out and doing yoga and other things.
Cool. That sounds like that type of schedule could lead to some balance for sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, that's kind of all the questions I have for you. I did want to ask, where can you find what you're working on? Your articles? Where do you post all that?
Another goal of mine is to try and market myself better, and so I'm trying to figure this out. Maybe I should create a website for that, or it'd be nice to maybe join with some other. I really admire some academics who are also into journalism and writing for mainstream audience as well. There's this one writer, Alex Shams, Shams, who has a blog on all things Persian, and he publishes for like Al Jazeera and all these other outlets, like really cool cultural freelance pieces, and then he has more academic stuff. So hopefully I can try and still merge journalism and cultural studies and my academic work as well. But I don't know, I co-translated a book with a professor called Threshold of Pain, which is an autobiography about this Palestinian-Syrian director during the war, and I have some copies of that. So if someone's interested who's listening, or if you are, I could mail you a copy of that. That's one of the most, also with a colleague who's just brilliant. I think he's going to be one of the most talented Arabists in the country or the world. So he went to Davidson with me, oddly, and he's really brilliant, named Nick Lobo. So we're working on translating a second book right now, one of Rashid's books, actually.
Super cool.
Historical nonfiction. And then I write pretty regularly for this outlet that's a bit niche called Middle East Eye, but they have a few 100,000 followers on Twitter, and they cover stuff about the Middle East. So I published probably like 7 or 10 articles with them, and I'm still writing stuff. And then I recently got a Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting grant to cover the elections in Lebanon, that happened in May, what the outcome meant, the slight glimmer of hope, if you will, because of the election results, and then what they meant for like actually the majority of the people and refugees. So I wrote 2 articles for Foreign Policy as well. So hopefully I'll find a way to advertise all this stuff in a more organized way. And I just finished my master's thesis, which is really too boring to ever share with anyone besides people who are interested in like textual analysis of 88 verses of pre-Islamic Arabic poetry in translation. So yeah, most people would need like several cups of coffee, but I don't know if you're still on the several cups of coffee a day. You were insane back in the day.
I stopped for like 2 years or something, but I started drinking coffee I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something again. So I'm at like two cups a day, but green tea's taking up a lot of the slack.
That sounds like a balance.
Yeah, there you go. So I think balance has been the theme of this, for sure.
And that's good because at one point we were both very unbalanced humans.
Yeah. I definitely agree, and it's cool to see you kind of working to strike a balance in your life and starting to make headway there. I feel like I'm kind of doing the same, so it's cool. It's cool how it works, man. It starts with the mountain school, and here we are.
Yeah, it's like a transformative experience that sounds cliche to say out loud, but really, really, really was. Like I said, the pre and post mountain school, what came before and what came
Yeah,
after. And I'm
yeah,
really grateful that you're doing this podcast. I think it's just a really cool initiative, and honored that you invited me
appreciate that.
on.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad to have you on, and maybe we'll have you on again if it keeps going.
Hope so. Well, let me know what I can do to support you. And it was really great
Sure.
catching up, man.
Yeah, yeah. Same to you, man. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna stop this recording here.